Hello friends, this is John in the United Kingdom, broadcasting to Elton John fans throughout the world. Hello, now today I'm reviewing Revamp, this CD which came out in 2018 at the same time as Restoration, which I've reviewed in a previous video. Now it's said that Bennie took charge of the Restoration project, which involves a lot of country music interpretations of their songs, whilst Elton took charge of the Revamp project, in which he wrote down a list of artists he would like to cover some of his songs, and most of them said yes. Elton called them an astonishingly eclectic crew of artists, and we certainly have a wide variety of talent on show on this particular disc. Now, it met with a fairly mixed reception. AllMusic gave it 2.5 stars, saying it was a bit dull and that there were more risks taken on the Restoration album. Rolling Stone gave it 3 stars and praised the artists who were least faithful to the originals. And that's something I'm going to be examining in this video, is to how faithful to those original recordings do some of these artists stay. So let's have a look at the booklet. So the booklet has this sort of neon lit Elton on the front. Inside, a little bit disappointing. Some nice artwork, but not really much information about the artists involved. More artwork, as you can see there. A few credits there, and then this tiny writing here about each track. It really is quite difficult to read. So not the greatest booklet. Now I'll be grading each track as usual with my system here, which goes from 1 all the way up to 10. Just some initial thoughts on this. When I was looking down the track listing for this album, I felt some of the choices were a little bit predictable, a little bit disappointing. It's almost like a greatest hits collection that's been revisited. And I would like to have seen a little bit of a dip into some deeper cuts here, which I think would have made slightly more interesting versions. Anyway, let's have a go and look at track number 1. Now, track number 1 is Bennie and the Jets. Now, this kind of underlines the previous point I've just been making. If any song has had too much exposure, it's this one, I feel, which is a fine song, and I enjoyed it on its original album, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. But how many more versions, how many more times do we need to hear this song? Now, this is Pink, an American singer who has written with Lady Gaga, and Logic, an American rapper, appearing on this one. There's a snatch of Elton on this one as well. It's got a thudding bass to it, so if you like that from your stereo system, you're going to enjoy this track. It's fairly inventive and fairly unusual. I quite like where they've taken this to, and they have given it a new life. And you certainly can't accuse them of sticking too close to the original on this one. I would say it's of some interest, but maybe not particularly the style of music that I enjoy. Anyway, I'm going to say it's average for me and give it 4. Now for track number 2, we've got the British rock group Coldplay reinterpreting We All Fall in Love Sometimes, which is from the Captain Fantastic album. We've got a gentle piano opening this with some soft humming. Chris Martin, the vocalist on this, then appears with some string accompaniment. He's got a super sensitive vocal for this one, which is ideally in use here for interpreting these wonderful lyrics from Bernie Taupin. I love the balance between the verse and the chorus. I'm going to say something controversial here because I reckon this is superior to the original version. I don't say that very often. The original version is brilliant, of course. But the balance between verse and chorus, I think, is a little bit more in chime. They're more in chime with each other than the original, where the verse was soft and the chorus really picked up. So if you see what I mean, it comes over as sort of one whole entity, much more than the original. Chris Martin here brings new life to familiar lyrics. There's a real melancholy, there's a real regret in the way he's done this. And I think they've done an absolutely cracking job on this one. It reminds me slightly of Sinead O'Connor's interpretation of Sacrifice, which again is excellent. I think Coldplay have done a great job here. For me, so far, this is the best cover I have heard of an Elton John song. You may disagree, please tell me below. But I think this is absolutely excellent. And if you only listen to one track on this album, please listen to this one. I'm saying it's perfect. 10 out of 10. Track number 3 is, I guess that's why they call it the blues. Alessia Cara is a Canadian singer-songwriter who has a go at interpreting this. Now, I reckon this is quite a difficult song to sing, actually. What is it? Is it ballad? Is it soul? Where does it actually sit? Elton does a great version of it, of course, but he should know how to do it because he wrote it and brought it all together. We've got some riffing going on the melody, which is a little bit too elaborate for me, departs a little bit too much from the original melody. I would say it's okay as a version of this, but it doesn't necessarily add that much to the original. I'm going to say fairly good. I'm going to give it 5. Now, track number 4 you may have heard separately. It's Candle in the Wind, reinterpreted by Ed Sheeran. Playing the guitar here and doing the vocals. It's got a faster beat than the original from Elton, but I think this seems to work pretty well. The vocal harmonies are very neat. He appears to be doing those himself. When we get into verse 2, we've got a nice backbeat coming in, and the song builds effectively to a very pleasant ending. Overall, I think this is an enjoyable cover that does do something different with what is, of course, a magnificent song. So I'm going to rate this as very good. 7. Track 5 is Tiny Dancer, interpreted by Florence and the Machine. We've got a piano intro here, which has changed slightly from the original, I reckon. There's a bit of echo on the vocal, which I'm always not so sure about. But they create quite a decent atmosphere here. The backing vocals are enjoyable. It builds pleasingly towards the refrain, which is enjoyable and satisfying. It stays fairly close to the original, this one, in structure, pace and harmony, but Florence Welch's voice expands well in the final refrain, which is quite exciting. So fairly decent, this one. I'm going to say fairly good. 6. Track number 6 is Someone Saved My Life Tonight, interpreted by Mumford and Sons, a British folk rock band. We've got quite a restrained opening here and the vulnerable voice of the singer, who is Marcus Mumford. But is it exciting? Is it involving? That's my concern slightly with this. There's no kick on Stranded by Your Haunted Social Scene, and Elton really revs it up on that particular moment. The song really sort of kicks in, doesn't it? I was kind of waiting for this to engage me, but what I didn't feel was sort of the bleakness and then the sense of redemption that Elton brings to the original. There's some muffled backing vocals going on there, and there's also some melodic changes I think I spotted too, and I would have walked headlong. That's interpreted slightly differently. It's all right, this one, but a little bit too restrained and not remarkable enough for me to say anything more than average. 4. The 7th track is Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word, interpreted by Mary J. Blige, who is an American singer-songwriter, referred to often as Queen of Hip Hop Soul. This arrangement is quite similar, I find, to the Bennie and the Jets arrangement on track 1. There are some different harmonies been involved here, been created, and it's always interesting when people do that. Firstly, why do they do it? But secondly, it can sort of make you sort of think about the song in a slightly different way. So that is welcome. It is different, but I find it quite hard to listen to. I'm not sort of carried through it on the emotional journey that Elton gives it. If you've heard Ray Charles singing this song, a fantastic version he does, which I will come to at some stage. But I'm afraid this is not really for me, this one. 2 out of 10. Now, the next one is Don't Go Breaking My Heart with Q-Tip, who is an American rapper, featuring Demi Lovato, who is an American singer. Now, I did fear the worst a little bit on this because there's a pretty disappointing version of this by RuPaul on the Two Rooms album, which I know a lot of you said in the comments you weren't very impressed with. So I approached with great trepidation. And there's kind of almost a reggae beat going on in this, which is quite interesting. The voices work well together, and it's certainly superior to the RuPaul version. Possibly taken a little bit slow. I don't know, what do you think? It's not a bad listen. It passes the time. and I quite like the creative fade out to this. So there are some points of interest in it. I would rate it as fairly good, actually. Going to give it 5. Now, track number 9 is Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters, and this is interpreted by The Killers, an American rock band with Brandon Flowers supplying the vocal. When you listen to this, you realise what a great, almost unspoilable song this is. There's hardly anything you could do to it to make it worse, because it's such a great song with lyric and melody, this one. It opens up quite hesitantly and then proceeds to a bold refrain. Maybe slightly too respectful to the original. Maybe they could have sort of cut loose a little bit on this one. And it's a little bit too long. It lacks a bit of pace as we're going through. The soundscape they've created reminded me of a song called Orchard Road, which was recorded by Leo Sayer back in the 80s. There's just something about the instrumentation that's been used there. I don't know whether you picked up on that at all. Anyway, it's okay. I'll give it 5. Track number 10 is Daniel, interpreted by the English singer-songwriter Sam Smith. Now, the opening of this, the guitar in it, reminded me of Jeff Buckley's version of Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, which is a very beautiful version. So I like the atmosphere that's been created there. We've just got Sam Smith and the guitar. It's an attractive verse with a really emotional delivery here. Then the piano comes in, creating a good sound. He picks up the beat in the refrain, possibly slightly too much. Maybe could have stayed with the pace of the verse and just kept it all in that reflective mode. But this is a good listen, actually. I'm going to rate it as very good and give it 7. Track number 11 is Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me by Miley Cyrus, who also appears on the Restoration album. I didn't particularly like this version. It wasn't quite to my taste. A little bit elaborate, a little bit loud, and I do prefer the original. Track 12 is Your Song by Lady Gaga, and you can hear here what a wonderful voice she's got. How do you improve on this song? Is it possible to? I don't think it is, but you can have a go at a decent version. There's some pleasant strings on the refrain here. It's quite an involving performance. It's pleasant to listen to. I think it's a worthwhile effort. Slightly overproduced, perhaps. But her riffing towards the end is okay because Elton has done some riffing on this. I don't think he does it anymore, but certainly some of those performances in the 80s, he was sort of riffing slightly on those melodies, especially right at the end. So quite acceptable, this one. I would say 6. Now, track 13 is Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, interpreted by the American rock or heavy metal band Queens of the Stone Age. Again, it's the perfect Elton song for me. So, I think, well, how can you possibly improve on this? We've got quite a sort of mushy guitar mix on this. And a surprisingly held back vocal. I was expecting a bit of heavy metal on this, a bit more energy perhaps. It sticks very close to the original. So I just think, well, why bother really? If you're going to be a heavy metal band, let's give it some welly on this, but it doesn't happen. So I say 3. Now, there is a bonus track on the Japanese edition of this CD. It's I'm Still Standing, which is interpreted by Tsukima Switch, who is a Japanese rock jazz fusion artist. I've tried to listen to this on YouTube Music, but for some reason, partway through, the vocals kind of cut out and it sounds like you're listening to it from a distance. So I can't really give a proper review of that. It sounded to me as if it was sticking very close to the original arrangement, with some parts of it in English, some parts in Japanese. So I suppose for a Japanese audience, they probably would appreciate that. Sounds fairly reasonable to me, and it's good that Elton's music is getting an audience out there. So that gave me 65 marks for a total of 13 tracks, which works out neatly to 5 marks per song. So I would say there are some items of interest on this album. It's certainly worth getting, certainly worth listening to, if only for the Coldplay track. But I think the Sam Smith track is very good on that. Lady Gaga, again, is a good one to listen to. and possibly the interesting Don't Go Breaking My Heart version with Q-Tip and Demi Lovato. That brings some quite nice energy to it. And Ed Sheeran's Candle in the Wind is very good as well. So there's plenty of interest in that, but I think we could have had some other songs. So put those marks together now with the restoration tracks, and at the top you can see there the Coldplay version of We All Fall in Love getting 10, and the Leanne Womack and Willie Nelson covers from restoration both getting 8. So far I've got 26 tracks on this list, and of course there are more to come. So if we look at my overall album rankings now, we've got Tumbleweed Connection at the top there with 7 marks. And then we come down to Revamp, which it comes in there at number 27 with 5 marks per track, just ahead of Leather Jackets and Made in England. Well, for instance, why not have a version of Part-Time Love or Shine On Through? Why not have a version of In Neon from Breaking Hearts or Diddy Shooter? Some of those perhaps less well-known Elton songs would have been given a really good boost by having a massive name sing them. So it's a pretty safe choice. But on the other hand, if it means getting Elton's music to say all of Lady Gaga's fans who'll be interested in your song might listen to a bit more of Elton, then fair enough. That's achieved its target in terms of reaching new people with Elton's music. Anyway, tell me what you think about this album. So if you have a favourite track, let me know in the comments below, or another song you'd like to see a well-known artist cover, let me know, and I'll do a follow-up video at some stage. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, we're still standing.